I'm joined by Iram Malik, founder of Foresight, an accountancy and money coaching practice, and executive coach and business mentor Nick Sellers. Iram, I'm really keen to understand more about your background and your pathway from starting your accountancy career in practice through to now running your own accountancy and money coaching practice. Can you talk us through the journey and what inspired you and motivated you to become an accountant, Iram?
Sure. Hello, Andrew. Hello, Nick. Thanks for having me on this. Where do I begin? So let's go going back to accountancy. I started about over 12 years ago in public practice, and I spent a year and a half there before I made a swift move into financial services. I spent 5 years there. The transition point between practice and financial services was simply because of opportunities. I feel I wasn't getting the adequate training in practice, and I had to make this switch in order to make my experience relevant so I could become an all rounded qualified accountant. And at that point, early on in my career, I felt that wasn't happening. In financial services, I spent 5 years there, worked up the ranks before I moved into industry. And having spent the latter part of my career in industry, I switched into, well, not switched, but integrated money coaching into my day to day role as well. And money coaching has been an interesting dimension to the work that I do on a day to day, where I'm actually seeing the eventual outcome that of the impact I can have on the client, which is something that you don't tend to see in industry because you're one piece in a large puzzle, and there's so many people who are contributing to that before the end result goes to the client. Whereas with money coaching, I'm actually getting to see the impact it's having on the person and on their finances. And it's been the most fulfilling part of my career so far. Recently, I have finished up in my industry role and I went all in with building my accountancy and money coaching practice called Foresight. And the added dimension that I now have with money coaching means that I am not just working with clients on their compliance work or making sure that they've ticked all the boxes in terms of their business. We do the underlying deeper work as well. Whereas if we have, for instance, a forecast for the business and the business owner is not actually executing on what they've agreed to do in the forecast, that's a money mindset issue. That's something that's hindering them from progressing forward. And that's where my money coaching expertise then comes in, that, okay, let's do some of that inner work because it's stopping you from making your business more successful. And yeah, here I am today. I'm actually really proud of the work that I've done so far and look forward to seeing where it goes next.
Fantastic. At what point, Iram, did you know and did you decide that you wanted to start your own accountancy practice?
I actually didn't know, which is very interesting. I was made redundant in my industry role, and the redundancy process went on for months and months where I didn't actually know if I was going to leave. During that time, I had already started money coaching alongside my day job, and I continued that cycle of continuing to do money coaching and doing my day job. And when the day job came to an end, I suddenly had a lot more time on my hands, and I was like, well, what's next? I was going to put myself on the job market again and then continue money coaching. But then there felt like a gap, and I needed to fill that gap. Sometimes you can't do that in isolation. You have to get out there. You have to meet people. And for me, the turning point is attending the Accountex event in May. I attended Accountex in London, and I met a whole host of accountants from all different industries there. We had great conversations. I attended speakers events, the speakers talks as well, which really opened my mind into what I wanted to do next. And I was like, well, if I go back into a day job that I was doing, how is that going to change or add another dimension to my career? It didn't seem like it was fitting in. So I was like, well, let's just park the day job for now. I'm going to buy myself time. I'm going to give myself 3 months to figure it out. I came back from Accountex and I was like, right, I think it's time to set up an accountancy practice, because one thing that was a deciding factor for me was the job security that I've experienced over the years. Being made redundant wasn't the first time it's happened to me. In my over 12-year career, I have faced this situation many times, putting myself in that risky position that you don't want to be in every couple of years or every few years. And that's where I found myself again. I said, well, first of all, that was a sign for me that what are you going to do to change that? Otherwise, the cycle is going to continue. And that became a deciding factor. My accountancy practice is going to be my business, where I won't be put out of work every couple of years. It's how I run it, and I'll be the one in the driver's seat. At the same time, I wanted to integrate money coaching into accounting because I was constantly seeing clients and business owners, even at the Accountancy event, that they've got all these lofty plans, but they can't follow through with them because their own inner money archetypes are getting in the way. And I was like, well, that's where accountants, that's probably something accountants need to work on, is have those conversations with clients, not as a scripted text that, okay, this is what we've agreed on, this is the tax you're paying, and that's it, the conversation's done for another few months or another year. That's not how I wanted to operate my accountancy practice. I'm like, if I'm going to take on a client, I want to be able to see their results through to the end. And for that, I had to integrate money coaching in. The result of that has recently been is the clients that I've taken on, and I've built a business plan for them or a business forecast for them. I've also gone down to do the deeper inner work with them. That is there anything that's hindering you from moving forward? And that's when they start to open up of what their actual reluctance or their hindrance factors are. That they're often people don't share those with their accountants anyway. But I managed to bring that out through my money coaching skills now, and then we can actually overcome them and say, right, here's your business forecast now. And we work together on that basis where I'm following it through, following their journey through to the end. And that's where money coaching, I think, on its own isn't sufficient service, in my opinion. I believe people do, as a money coach, they do the inner work, we do the money mindset work, but then that journey comes to a close with the money coach because they don't have the financial expertise to see the success through with a client. And I think that's where I switch my hat and become an accountant at that point. And I was like, right, let's make sure you put this into practice and see your end results.
Brilliant. Could you give some examples, Iram, of what the hindrance factors are typically holding people back in these areas and what you've identified when you've been having those conversations?
It's the first one is I'd like to point at an money archetype. It's called the victim archetype, and that's one where people are so caught up in their own drama, their own inner emotions that they fear losing out. Oh, this has happened to me before. Oh, so and so competitor is going to come in and do this. I can't afford this. That's all a victim archetype who just keeps complaining. And that's where through that language, I can pick up which money archetype it is. And I was like, right, your victim's talking now. It's quite loud. It's in the driver's seat. And that's when I make them aware of it, first of all. And then they're like, yeah, you're right. I was like, what are you going to lose? Let's list them out. What is the fear of losing? Like, and then they actually don't have many concrete reasons of losing out in business. I'm like, you're an entrepreneur, right? You're a business owner. It comes with risk. You're already made such bold moves in setting up your own business. So let's have some small and significant steps to overcome that. So we agree the steps on how to overcome their fear of losing out and what their backup plans are. Again, that's where having that accounting expertise really helps because money coaching alone will not help them to run a business successfully. And when I blend the two together, the client can actually see the factors that the business is actually doing well. It's their own hindrances that are coming into play. And again, it's most of the time it's the victim archetype. You can sense it a mile away when they start complaining about things that don't exist.
It's fascinating to hear Iram describe how coaching in the accountancy conversations, if I can boil it down to that, is helping a kind of a similar observation is that a lot of accountants are actually introducing their clients to a coach because they themselves are not equipped in the way that you are.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Well, yeah, and the reason for it is because I think there's a little pressure coming through industry bodies that actually the accountants need to be adding some more value for clients, not just in terms of introducing more of their own services, more kind of recognized services, but where you've got a client who's got potential high growth, working with a coach actually can help them in parallel with the regulatory requirements that might be associated with accountancy and all the rest of it. I'm not trying to oversimplify something I don't understand, but actually working with the coach kind of at a leadership level helps bring the team together because often leadership teams are a collection of individuals with individual objectives.
100%.
And the coaching engagement assignment can actually help get everybody pointing in the same direction.
That's a very valid point. And I think there's a gap in the industry that you've very, very succinctly pointed out there is we're all part of such a huge organization that at times we don't get that front office expertise, if you like. I mean, I'm speaking from my experience in industry. I was not getting that client facing interaction, which would even start to prep me for those sort of money coaching conversations, shall we say, because we've never had exposure to it. And the people who are in those roles, they're very reluctant to let anybody in because I don't know, fear of losing their jobs, I guess. That there is that factor there, which is why people like myself wouldn't get exposure in our day-to-day jobs. How else are we meant to have those conversations with our clients if we've never had exposure to them?
What do you? I hope you don't mind me asking you another question.
Oh,
What do you find in terms of the skill set that's needed to be an accountant and the
mhm.
skill set needed to be a coach? How do you find those? Do they blend easily together, or do they kind of, have to be kind of crashed together to be able to make it work for a client?
I believe they both need to work in tandem for sure. They're not a crash. It's not like they're both in conflict with each other. But I feel like the this traditional way of educating our accountants doesn't incorporate it. Speaking from my experience, I attended university for 4 years. I had no practical experience exposure throughout my 4 years at uni. Had no exposure to clients. I left uni with the foundational principles of accounting and finance, but I've never put them into practice. And then when you get into practice or when you start training for your ACC exams, for instance, there's still no exposure. You're becoming the best at the technical expertise, but when it comes to client facing conversations, that factor is missing. And I think I only identified it from my lack of fulfillment in my day to day job that I'm doing heaps of work here for the client. We're invoicing them, we're billing them for like over 1 million each month, but I'm not getting to see the end outcome of how the client feels about the services we're providing because there's people further along in the chain who are getting to see that. And I think there was that lack of fulfillment that had started setting in for me, which probably happens to a lot of people in this career when they don't actually, when their job's not fulfilling anymore. But I feel like I was loving my job. If I hadn't been made redundant, I'd probably still be there. It was just the lack of fulfillment that I was getting from not seeing how the client was being impacted. And I think that's what I was longing to see, that my work does impact in a wider capacity. So when I started working with people on a one-on-one, I was like, yeah, it does. I did do something good in life.
I think it's brilliant, Aram, that you've identified that because, like you
Mhm.
say, probably there's so many accountants who have that frustration, but they
Yeah.
haven't maybe identified what it is. And as you always say, Nick, what feeds your soul? And obviously for you, Aram, you want to see the outcome and the
Yeah.
positivity you bring into that business. And without that,
Mhm.
that's the part of the job your joy's taken away. Um,
Yeah.
and I had a question also for you, Nick. Three entrepreneurs here, although sometimes it doesn't feel like it. And Aram, you picked up on that, you know, people starting a business have a high risk appetite already, and then sometimes their view of risk gets clouded throughout running a business. And you mentioned having a backup plan there, and something that I've thought over the years is you shouldn't have a plan B, or should you have a plan B, or should you just be all in if you want to see the most success? What's your thoughts on that?
I think the external circumstances do play a huge factor in it. And if you're in an economy like the UK at present, I would highly recommend having a backup plan because at least you're prepared for the worst then. The last thing as a business owner that any of us would want here is ending up in a precarious situation that we now don't know how to handle because we didn't see through to what's the worst that could happen. Even though it might not happen, it's at least it's a factor that we've taken into consideration. And through money coaching, what I've learned is once we've considered the worst possible outcome, it's always something well below that is going to actually end up happening anyway. But our mindset has already been brought in to look as far as that and then work our way through reverse engineering to what's actually going to happen. So yeah, I highly go for having a backup plan, like mine is to go back into a job if this all fails.
It's interesting, I think the notion of a backup plan kind of also taps into our tolerance for risk as
Mhm.
well. That in some cases, some people never even consider a backup plan because they're just all in, totally invested in what they embark, the journey
Yeah.
they embark on. And the thought of failure maybe doesn't even register with
Mhm.
them, but, so they may have a very high tolerance of risk. Others less so, especially if we have kind of commitments that we
Mhm.
need to make, monthly payments, support for relatives,
Yeah.
those that we love, that kind of thing. And so I guess our tolerance for risk and the need for a backup plan might even be something that varies a bit over time because of
Mhm.
circumstances and because of experience as well. I think
Yeah.
somebody that's kind of already embarked on a journey and been burned may well be much more likely to want to have a safety net there the next time they try it.
Yeah. And I
And
think that does come down to the 7 other money archetypes that there as well. People who are prone to taking risk have the warrior archetype and they will keep going with it until they don't see the results. Whereas you get the fool archetype as well. So there's one that's called a fool who will go and take these risks, but they're not calculated risks. And they
right.
obviously end up giving it all away just because of their lack of that consideration as well.
So that's like the equivalent of jumping out of a plane without checking whether or not you've actually tied the
Absolutely.
parachute on.
Yeah.
I think it's a fascinating area. Has there been who's inspired you throughout your career, Aram? Has there been particular people that you've looked up to or who've inputted into your career journey that have got you to where you're at just now?
That's a very good question, Andrew. I'm going to have a really frank answer and an honest one to this one. That since I started out in my career, I've had no mentor. I've had nobody showing me the ropes. Um, Coaching, having a mentor is gaining a lot of traction in recent times. But when I was training about 2010 onwards time, that was non-existent. And when I went into the workplaces that I was at, there was little initiative from management or my seniors to even take that position. And I hadn't even been introduced to the concept of having a mentor. So every decision that I've made, it's been off my own experience, off my own knowledge. I've literally navigated my entire career off my own back. There's been no support of that nature ever from anyone. And I think that's quite, it sounds a bit harsh at the same time, but I've been in a number of places for work now, and I've worked for one of like all the big companies now, shall we say, but that never came to me. So yeah, I've
Mm.
made mistakes along the way in my career, but it's taught me self dependency and resilience that you can't expect people to give you it all. And I've now got to a point where I rarely turn to people for support unless I'm in part of a networking group, because I've never had it. I don't know what it's like to have a mentor or a coach within the workplace or generally to further up your career because I've never had that exposure.
If I could just share an experience or an observation there,
Hmm.
in my corporate career, which is many decades, I was given a coach when I was in my 40s, and
Wow. Okay.
that was for me a kind of a career changing moment. So I worked with
Okay.
my coach for a couple of years with the company's sponsorship, and I was amazed at how my thinking changed because I was exposed to somebody who wasn't there to tell me what to do, but was there to explore the way I was looking at things, the way I was approaching projects and problems. And I think that was actually the thing that inspired me ultimately to become a full time coach. My career carried on for a good while after those couple of years, and I found myself coaching and mentoring informally more in the business.
Yeah.
But that was a pivotal moment for me. I know, Andrew, you didn't ask me that question, but I just thought that that experience seemed relevant because up until then, Ram, I was like you. I'd kind of gone through my career figuring things out as I went along.
Hmm.
And I just found that having that coach and those conversations that we had every month just really just helped me to kind of just unlock more of myself.
I'm glad you said that, Nick, because I've only discovered coaching and mentoring and having a mentor in the first place in the last, say, 4 years. And since that has happened, my career trajectory, not in terms of what you can see physically in my career ladder, but just generally of how I've started operating my life, my jobs, my career overall, it changed just because of people were triggering me to look at things a different way and not just through the tunnel vision that I probably had up until that point. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because they're not telling you what to do. They're getting you to explore different avenues without them filling in the gaps. You're actually filling in the gaps yourself, which is why I find coaching so powerful.
Yeah, and I was actually going to ask you, what do you enjoy most about coaching?
hmm I think with coaching, what I enjoy the most is people making discoveries about themselves that were within them all that time, but they didn't know. Why they're making certain decisions on repeat, and getting that when they have that aha moment on their face. I was like, yeah, there you go. That's what I was trying to get to. But at the same time, I think we're trying to look for solutions through money coaching rather than just making discoveries. And when it
Yeah,
comes to finding solutions on how to overcome the limitations in their money mindset, they are the ones who come up with the solutions and not me. And I've literally, you would think that as a money coach, I'm going to say, right, do X, Y, Z. They actually come up with the solutions, and then I was like, right, we have a plan in place. You're the one who's put it there. Let's get cracking.
Yeah,
yeah.
it's brilliant. See, just from my understanding around, so money coaching, would it also say explore the reason why they have that mindset towards money? Say, for example, if you grew up very wealthy and you never had to want for anything as a kid, or if you grew up very poor, that will probably affect how you view money throughout your life. Is that something that you would explore
Absolutely.
as a money coach?
It's called a money biography, where I get people to fill out a document. It starts from age 6 right through to their current age. And they fill in every money memory that they have. And it could be absolutely anything from a young age. So if they had to ask for, say, pocket money at the age of 8, and that's a money memory, they've written it down. And when they write it down, we can pick up from their language how that conversation had went. Like, there's an interesting example that I had from one client where their dad would not give them money for anything, but the rule was if they needed money, they would have to leave a note on the breakfast bar, and their dad would look at it in the morning, and if he approved of it, he would leave the money, or he wouldn't leave anything. And we started going deeper on that when I read their money biography. That why do you think that was happening? And I was like, well, what happened if you were to directly ask him for money? She was like, oh, he would kick off and he wouldn't give us anything, and it would turn into a whole big argument. And I said, well, your dad found a coping mechanism. In order to avoid conflict, he's like, leave a note. Because if he doesn't leave anything, there's not going to be an argument over it. And you're not going to be the first one to bring up with that in that argument anyway. And then my next question usually is, what archetype is driving your dad at this point? And they would know it's the tyrant archetype. He's a tyrant. And never, I know some of these names do sound a bit, but they actually describe all the characteristics that you would have as a tyrant or money archetype, that he just wanted to be in that driving seat, wanted to make all the money decisions. And if it's not in line with his principles, he's just going to have a conflict. So that was his way of avoiding conflict.
Wow, it's interesting. I never knew it
It was,
existed. It's fascinating, and I love your social media posts, and I can't say I'm always a little bit jealous to see you're in a nice sunny warm climate in the UAE. Can you
yeah.
talk us through a bit more about how you split your time between Scotland, the UK, and the Middle East, and why you do it, and the benefits of doing that?
Certainly. That is something I started doing a few years ago, and at that point I was still in my day job. And like a lot of us, we had been working from home due to the lockdowns that had happened back to back. And with me, it had got to me as well, like many people, like, right, what do I do from here? There is no sign of us returning to an office. I'm not sure I want to return to an office. That's another one that was like many people, but I needed a change of surroundings. So what I started doing was, I'm never one to go from 0 to 360. That's never been my nature. So what I started doing was take my laptop and I would work from local cafes in the area. I was like, well, that's nice. It's good to get out the house sometimes and do that. Then I came back home, and that's when I started getting thoughts, well, if I can work from home, I can work from a cafe. What's to say I can't work from anywhere else? And I think it was that thought that started growing on me more and more. And one day it was in October. It was in October. I packed my bags and I went to Spain to work there for a week. I was like, right, I can do that as well. And I think it started building my confidence till eventually I ended up in Turkey, in Istanbul, I then worked from Jordan. And then my repeated location has been the UAE, where I've been working remotely. And that's what I was doing right up until a few months ago, and I'm due to go out there again. The reason why that has appealed to me as a location is the culture and the environment. Obviously, the sunshine too. I think it's more of the collaborative environment that I've experienced there. And when it comes to different energy levels, there's very high entrepreneurial energy there. Everyone's eager to have those conversations with you. The doors are open to everyone. The networking events are all very inclusive, very positive working environment, and people actually follow through with the conversations that they have with you. And I think there's more of a personal connect with people there as well. They genuinely want to have those deeper conversations with you as to what's driving you inside, what's that inner fire, where is it coming from? And they're the sort of conversations that I love having during money coaching, and I think that's transpired into having those in networking events as well. And what that does is whenever I come back to Scotland, it keeps that energy going for me to take part in projects, participate in things here that I wouldn't do otherwise, because I don't see that same sort of energy here, but it keeps me going when I get back. And I think the reason why I've kept on doing it is it's opened a lot of doors for me internally, when the way I used to view life and my career in terms of having just a 9 to 5, bit of money coaching on the side, and then just ticking along through life. Whereas when I started doing these moves through remote work, I realised there's so much more that I can do. I think there's untapped talent that I could be tapping into that I'm just sitting on at home. And that's something that I do say on my social media posts as well, Andrew, that working remotely and working from home are not the same thing. I am not in favour of working from home day in, day out. I don't think that's uplifting in any way for the company, for people, as an individual. I don't think it's bringing any value to anybody if people continue to work from home day in, day out. What I am for is working remotely. Pick up your devices and go somewhere. Go and find an opportunity to network with people while you're working. You don't always have to go to an event. You could go to a cafe. You don't know who you're going to be sitting next to. It could be the CEO of XYZ. But you can have a conversation that you'll walk away with. Who knows, you might bring the company business, or you might bring yourself another opportunity. But if we don't step outside, we're not going to know.
I think it's a really, really good point, Aram. And I do think in Scotland we do have quite a self-limiting beliefs. Just generally speaking, I think Scottish people are quite limited by their own beliefs. What can we do about that? As a, it's a big question, but what you've given some suggestions on a personal level, and I completely agree with them. You need to be out there, and good things happen. But what should Scotland be doing as a country to address that and help younger people have a broader mindset?
Andrew, I think because I was born and raised in Glasgow. I know the people really well. It's like they're like family, and I think you can probably vouch for that when you look around. What I do know is people are very comfortable with what they have. They have no desire for any more or any less. They're just happy where they are. It's a working class population, shall we say. And the way to uplift it is through collaboration. If we all don't meet, if we don't generate ideas together, we can't follow through with them. And I think we need to have more platforms, more opportunities for people to be able to do that. So when it comes to networking events, for instance, in Dubai, there's something catering for every group in the population. And if there's going to be, for instance, a younger one, we can have a younger trainee networking group, for instance, where people get to collaborate and come up with fresh ideas. And then people who are at mid-level in their careers, they can have a networking group as well. There just needs to be more opportunity here for people to get together. In isolation, I think we're going to do very little at this rate. And that's where I would like to bring the energy back into Scotland. I do bring it back here every few months, but it flattens out really quickly. Like, for example, tomorrow I've got a meeting with ACCA, and I'm really looking forward to it because these are the sort of things I'll be raising with them. That up until I set up my own accountancy practice, there was a lot of disconnect between ACCA and I. Whereas ACCA in Middle East, where I'm not even a member, have been in more contact with me, and I've been a part of their events in Dubai. Why not ACCA Scotland? The head office is here, not in anywhere else in the world, but we have ACCA's head office in Scotland, but we do very little to even gain that traction, gain that exposure, uplift people's energy. And this doesn't just go for accountants, it needs to go across the board with professionals.
Yeah.
Could I add a thought as well, Andrew? In this respect, there's a phrase: the mind only knows what it knows until it goes to another place.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, I think when people are not so much content with where they are, but very focused on dealing with what they're dealing with, then
Yeah.
it's like their heads are down. They need to lift heads to look at other possibilities. And I think what Iram has outlined, so eloquently in the last few minutes has been kind of like, just sometimes we have to lift our thinking, lift ourselves
Mm-hmm.
out of the environment we're in and actually just take account of other possibilities. And we talked earlier about limiting beliefs, and the thing about limiting beliefs is that very often they have no real substance, and so we think that something is a fact, but we can't provide the proof for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we realize that we have no proof, then it almost kind of unlocks our opportunity, frees our
Absolutely.
potential to actually then take our mind to another place and go and try something different.
I think
Yeah.
you've hit the nail on the head there, Nick. Summed it up really well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Brilliant. And a question, and this for you as well, Nick. You both mentioned you didn't have coaches or mentors until fairly far on in your career, or until recently. Obviously, Ram, you've been on a very reflective journey there, looking at what feeds your soul and what makes you happy, and you've obviously got to a great place, which is fantastic. But how did you do that? How did you educate yourself, and how did you gain that awareness without an outside perspective?
Um, I think for me, in terms of how I got to this point, it's been when you're out of job every couple of years. I think that's a real wake up call. And I went into this reflective phase in the last few months when I had to evaluate my options. I wouldn't say the awareness happened in the last few months. I've been on this journey for the last few years where I was trying to discover where I'm going next. And I didn't know where I was going next at all. I didn't know if I wanted to go back into accountancy practice. The job had started finally, it was looking stable, and I wasn't going to be shown the door anytime soon. And that's really what I thought where my last role was going to go. But when it happened again, I was like, right, this is perhaps the fourth or fifth time this has happened to me. A lack of income is a big factor. We can't deny it that that comes into play when you're having this reflective phase in your life. And I was like, well, how many times am I going to put myself through that and not take any measures to overcome it? So I was like, right, a job is not going to be an option for me again because it's going to be optional. I wouldn't say it's not going to be an option at all. I was going to make it optional. So the first priority then became is my money coaching and accountancy practice. And I think sometimes speaking to people, meeting people can be that turning point. We can go through reflective phases in isolation, but they only materialize when you speak to other people. And I think for me, going to Accountex in May became that point where all those thoughts that I had been having over my redundancy, over what I wanted to do next, it was like although somebody had just come and wrap them all up for me. And they're like, right, this is where it's going for you. You've wrapped up all these thoughts. Let's bring them back concisely, refine them. It's a bit of money coaching at Accountex, and without even realizing it for me, that people started putting things into perspective for me. And I think that's where I realized that sometimes speaking to the right people at the right time can help, and the timing's not always perfect. Accountex was not meant to be for me to I just went there for networking, let's be honest, and to see where it was going to lead to. I had nothing in mind of where it was going to help me with a career decision, but that's what it ended up becoming. And how did I get here was it's been a series of chapters going to Dubai, going to see what people are doing there, how they work there, and the options that they have. It's like, well, I want those options for myself. I want it for people around me. And I've always had that giving nature. And something that I've promised myself is whatever I gain in the UAE, I want to come back and give it back home, give it back to Scotland. And that's something that I've had. It's perhaps my overarching desire with everything that I do is I want to give back here because there is potential and does not mean we all of us, like expats, go to the UAE and live a good life, but forget that because life is all about giving. And for me, it's about giving back here, and that's something that I want to do in the end.
Fantastic. And have you any ideas specifically, Aram, if what would be your dream or your goal in terms of giving back? Is there something you have
Mhm.
in mind?
I think similar to what I've already mentioned is having an environment for people to collaborate, and have those conversations, start to fuel them up, because right now they're not being fueled, and that's a platform that I would like to create. Not virtual, I want it to be a physical platform for people to come together. And because if we don't talk, we're not going to see anything change. And I think we all need to talk more.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I completely agree, Aram. And yeah, I suppose just what are your short to medium term goals professionally, Aram? I know you've fairly recently launched the accountancy practice itself, and it's going very well. And what's your continued plans for that?
In the short term, I think the plan is to continue establishing the practice in the UK and then eventually start branching out into the UAE. I have done that to an extent, but that's at very early stages, and I want to learn how to walk before I start running. So that's the short term goal, is to start establishing the practice here and then tap into the UAE market. The reason why I have set my eyes on the UAE market as my lofty goal is because their tax system is very premature compared to the UK system. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for people like myself to get in there and start doing some of the work, which is very basic from our perspective, because they've not seen all of the different levels of tax rates and how it all works here. It's a pretty complicated system that we have. They don't have that exposure, which means our tax system is very basic right now. And if I can start to establish myself in another location, not only will it diversify my practice, but also give me exposure to a whole new
Mm.
country, their tax system, their ways of working, and again, diversify my career further. And that's been my concern in the last few years. Is I want to be able to diversify that and not rely on one job. That was my biggest risk factor that I've had to experience the repercussions of many times.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic and very inspiring, and I love the way that you've reflected on things and got to where you're at just now. And what brilliant journey! And I'm sure
Thank
you'll
you so
be
much.
wish you continued success, and I'm sure you'll be massively successful.
Appreciate
No,
that. Thank you.
so really appreciate your time. And if anyone would like to reach out to you, either as an accountant, a money coach, or for general careers advice, how would be the best way for them to get in touch with you?
At the best way at the moment is through LinkedIn. So my profile is public. You can contact me through DMs there. There's also Foresight's business page there as well. And in terms of email, I have info@foresight.com. You can contact me on there as well. I think most people come through to me on LinkedIn these days.
Definitely. And Nick, for yourself, if someone's looking to get in touch regarding executive coaching or business mentoring, how best to reach out to you?
I think the same as Iram. I think LinkedIn is a good platform. They can either DM me, or there is actually the facility there to book a discovery call. So there's a little link there at the top of my profile. 20 minutes, no charge, no obligation, and we can find out a little bit about each other and discover whether or not there's an opportunity to work together.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. Well, I'm feeling very inspired, and I thank you both for taking the time, and we'll hopefully speak again soon.
I
Thanks very much.
appreciate this very much. Thanks for having me, Andrew. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Iram.
Thanks, Ram. Thanks, Nick.
Bye bye.